and we will dive into today's Bible study. Again, our background picture is the one that my daughter took of our property. And today we're going to cover two chapters, Genesis 46 and 47. And I'm Pastor Dave Kuyers, of Country Bible Church in Boonville, California. And I will get it published on YouTube. And I did publish last week's on YouTube. And the Lord's blessed us with 100 subscribers now. So thank you, Lord. There's evidence now of mitochondrial DNA, common ancestor of all humans. Okay? We're not going to read the whole article. It's a long article. But the DNA evidence for the Christian, Jewish side of apologetics is overwhelming at this point. And now we've proven a mitochondrial Eve, if you would. They say, if you were to trace all family trees as far back as possible, you'd find we're all related, albeit extremely distantly. The common female ancestor from whom all humans descended is, they call mitochondrial Eve, ellipsis. Eve is technically known as mitochondrial most recent common ancestor, or MT-Eve, or MT-MRCA for short. And her lesser-known male counterpart, known as Y-chromosomal Adam. Mitochondrial Eve was the first female human to whom every living person can trace their genealogy. Every human on the planet carries the Eve gene, including 147 people and fetuses from the original 1987 study. Period, ellipsis, and a lot of ellipses in there. I clipped out the non-scientific, non-historical, evolutionary speculation and lies. So if you go to the article, you're going to see they attribute it all to millions of years. What it is they have traced every human being back to the first mother, Eve. But much later than that, all men come back to one man. And Ellen's exactly right. It comes back to Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? So we've got three different male bloodlines that we're all descended from, and all the females, all four females on Noah's Ark, they all went back to Eve. So many other bloodlines. We don't know how many bloodlines they covered, but I'm sure it's a lot of them. And that's a link of it there if you want to look it up by historyfacts.com. So last time we did Genesis 45. We only did one chapter last time we were here. And I said, Jesus concealed himself from his brothers at the first coming. Matthew 13, he does the same thing. Matthew 13 is the dividing, continental divide in the Gospels. Happens in all four of them. There comes a point where Jesus presents himself to the Jews, and then they reject him. The Lord bless you, young man. And then from Matthew 13 or the other references in the other three Gospels, he turns his back literally on the Jews and goes to the Gentiles. So he no longer, and the parables that he preaches to national Israel, he doesn't explain it to them. He only explains his parables to the Gentile, to his disciples. And then we find in our passage that Joseph concealed himself from his brothers at the first coming. Genesis 41, Joseph made himself known to his brothers at the second coming when they came to visit him. Jesus will reveal himself to his brothers at his second coming. Okay? He's going to be the same pattern that you see with Joseph is what Jesus is going to fulfill with his first coming and second coming. He hid himself from his brothers at the first coming. They rejected him. And then he went on and revealed himself at the second coming. And he only did it after they repented. Remember 42:22? Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy, but you wouldn't listen? Now we must give an accounting for his blood." All of a sudden, Reuben realizes that they are being punished, basically, retributively, because of their selling their brother into slavery. Verse 33 of 44, Judah said, "Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy." That should give you great encouragement. Here we have Judah. We are descended of the Lion of tribe of Judah. And this Judah here stands up as an intercessor, willing to take the punishment for his younger brother. And that's what Jesus did for us on the cross. 45:18, and take your father and your household and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. That's a tremendous encouragement to us. God doesn't give us the scrappy leftovers. He wants you to have the best of the land and eat of the fat of the land. And on the second encounter with the world ruler, Israel's family was blessed abundantly and will be also at the second coming. They will be, and if you want to see what that looks like, turn to Ezekiel, the last 9 chapters, 40 to 48, and you'll see what the Jews are going to get for 1,000 years yet future. Then I added this late this morning, the second time. Joseph, Moses, King David, Joshua, and Jesus all were rejected by the Jews the first time. That's some of the references. Luke 11:47, Jesus told the national Israel, "Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and it was your fathers who killed them." They rejected every prophet that God sent them. Remember, Jesus gave one parable about the king sending prophets to him, and they killed him, and they killed him, and they killed him. And then the king finally says, "I'll send him my son, and surely they won't kill him." And then he sent his son, and what did they do? They killed him also. And that's this first time coming is always rejected. On the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family was disclosed to Pharaoh. We get that from Stephen's account in Acts chapter 7, verse 13. So I say it was the man, the Lord of the land, that's the way Joseph is described in 42:30, who revealed himself to Israel's descendants just like it will be next time. The Lord of the land is going to reveal himself the next time. Continue on. We see that promise in Romans 11:26, which says, "And so all Israel will be saved, just as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove ungodliness from Jacob." That has not happened yet. But God promises that it is going to happen. The deliverer, Jesus Christ, will come to Jerusalem, and he will save Jacob, save their bacon, and he's going to remove ungodliness from them. Hasn't happened yet. But there is a precondition. Jesus said, Matthew 23:39, "For I say to you, from now on," from the first century on, "until you will not see me until you say, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Once they confess their sins and call out to God with this promise from Psalm 118, then God will come and deliver them. And all Israel will be saved in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, in 1 hour, God says. And I say this until in Matthew 23:39 indicates a required condition before national Israel is saved. If all Israel will be saved, we see in Romans 11:26, if that was not true, then Jesus would not have said until. He would have said, "From now on you will not see me," period. You see the difference there? But he said, "until." So I say look up the last 9 chapters of Ezekiel and Revelation 7 and 14 if you want to see how that flushes out and a lot of the other promises of God's regathering and saving Israel. Genesis 46, 1 through 7. I'll read it to you. Verse 1, "So Israel set out with all that he had." Remember, Israel means Jacob, and Jacob means Israel. So Jacob, or Israel, set out with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." And he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will close your eyes. Okay? We're not getting interrupted. Verse 5. Then Jacob arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob and their little ones and their wives in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They took their livestock and their property, which they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and came to Egypt. Jacob and all of his descendants with him, his sons and his grandsons with him, his daughters and their granddaughters, and all his descendants he brought with him to Egypt. So this is this fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant. God said the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full to Abraham. But you're going to be in the land, a distant land. So Jacob, I'm convinced that he thought he was just going for a little visit. A few months, maybe the summer, go get a little grub, take a little swim in the sea there or whatever, and then come back to Canaan. I'm adding that. It's not in Scripture, but you kind of get that from the way he says it. In Acts 7:15, then Jacob went down to Egypt when he and our fathers died. And I added, they all die there. They're in captivity there for 400 years. They ended up in there. And God has to assure them that it's okay to go to Egypt. Why would that be? God says in 46 verse 3, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. Well, why would he be afraid to go down to Egypt? Why did God say he had already set out? He had already taken off to go to Egypt. So he's not encouraging him. He's just giving him the okay. 45:28, Jacob had said, I will go and see him. He didn't say, I will go and live in the land for 400 years. I'm going to go visit him. Genesis 26:2, the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. So Isaac had a very specific commandment of God to not go to Egypt. You remember all the trouble they had when Abram went down to Egypt and picked up Hagar, got Ishmael, and we're still fighting with them over it. That's what all that terrorism over there is the descendants of Ishmael. That's why there's no peace in the Middle East from that one trip to Egypt. And it's going to continue until the Lord comes, the Prince of Peace. Isaiah 30, verse 1. This comes in many years after the Joseph story, but there we find out, woe to the rebellious children who declare the Yahweh, who execute a plan but not mine, and make an alliance but not of my spirit, in order to add sin to sin, who proceed down to Egypt without consulting me, to take refuge in the safety of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore the safety of Pharaoh will be your shame, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt your humiliation. So this is later. Let me grab a bottle of water a minute. This is very much later, but it's still in effect. God tells them, don't go back to Egypt, over and over and over again. And Jacob's father, Isaac, had gotten a specific commandment to not go to Egypt. So Jacob is hungry. They're starving to death. And he says, let's go to Egypt. And packed it up and left. I found this. Well, Mr. Pharaoh, sign here and your troops, chariots, and horses will be covered against just about anything short of an act of God. And by the way, stay out of the Red Sea too. He could have added, So Abraham's promise comes up again here. 46 verse 3. I will make you a great nation there, God assures Jacob. Jacob would have remembered Abram's promise, this is his grandfather, from God in Genesis 12:2. And I will make you a great nation. He's repeating the exact same words to him that he'd given to his grandfather about the land. This is going to come up at the end of my presentation. You'll see why that's significant, I think. Verses 8 through 26. I found this. when it's your turn to read and the verse is all names, that's where we're at with chapter 46. So, but I love that look on his face. Me? You want me to read all those names? 46 verse 8. Now these are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob and his sons, who went to Egypt. Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. And then I interrupt him. I say, I'm not going to mispronounce all 70 of these Hebrew names for you. However, if you take a Bible dictionary and a concordance and look up the meaning and the usage of each name, I'm sure it will be very fruitful. These kinds of studies are ones that you have to, I can't take you through all of them. I try to give you enough tidbits here to pique your curiosity. But you need to go on Bible.com or Blue Letter Bible or one of the others and search it in the Hebrew, search it in the Greek, do a concordance search for some of the words, and you will find that it's always rewarding. I've never been disappointed when I launch on a study like that. I would also encourage you to at least memorize the first 4 sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Simeon occurs 53 times in the NAU Bible. Levi is the head of the Levitical priesthood. The next 4 books in the Pentateuch, in the Torah, the next 4 books of Moses are loaded with references to the Levitical priesthood and Levi and his sons and his grandsons and his great-grandsons. So that's why I say you should memorize Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Why would we be concerned about Judah? I think you know about the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So, also remember that God not only knows every human being by name, he also counts every hair on their head. These genealogies are great when you want to sort out who is who in the Bible. It's also important for you to go back through in these genealogies and look at them and go, God keeps pretty good records. He knows every person from Adam and Eve on. He knows who they were, what their name was, what their genealogy was, what their family tree was, what their innermost seeking and lies and deceptions of their heart is. He knows it all. And you get that from studying these kinds of details in the Bible. Judah should be interesting, this one. Judah, the word Judah, the name Judah appears 841 times in the NAU Bible with the wild card. That's a lot. I mean, I didn't do a name count on Noah and Moses and some of the others, but Judah comes up a lot in the Bible. So you need to know that he was 4th in the pecking order. The top 3 were disqualified, and Judah gets the right of the firstborn. Then, we're not going to do much on this today, but I wanted to open this can of worms for you. We get a listing here in verse 8 through 27 of Israel's descendants. And we call those the 12 tribes: Manasseh, Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, Issachar, Gad, Ephraim, Dan, Benjamin, Reuben, Simeon, and Judah. Okay? You see any problem with that? We have the 12 tribes, yet where's Levi? You see the tribe of Levi listed in here? Where's Joseph? We've just spent a huge amount of time studying Joseph. Where's Joseph? He didn't make the list. Okay, this is just to get your gears spinning about this. You want to go on a fruitful Bible study? Every time the 12 tribes are listed up, I want you to dig into it, look them up, look at the order that they're in, look at who's included and who's not included, look at how they got 12 tribes, why there's Levi missing, and on and on. In the next 3 or 4 chapters, we're going to be opening that can of worms more fully. But I want you to get the taste of it now. Challenge yourself to study this and figure it out. Then there's an issue here, a issue. It's either 70 or 75 in all. Stephen in Acts chapter 7, there's 2 commentaries. Let me go back. 2 commentaries on the Bible that are crucial. The first places you should look when you have questions about history. Chapter 7, Stephen's account in a court of law in Paul's day, in the first century, when you were getting dragged into court, you had to defend yourself, they would hire a spokesman, an attorney, a lawyer. And he would give a history of how you got to this point in time and how we got to this. And they were long dissertations. We have some of them. Some of them went all the way back to the creation of the world. And they go through and there's one of those in the book of Acts where Paul's being brought to court and the opposing attorney starts in on one of those. He's going to give his little spiel on from the creation of the world all the way down to Paul's arrest. And the just interrupts him. No, just cut that off. And he goes, oh, sure. And he just jumps to the ellipsis down to the arrest of Paul. But that's what's going on. So you want to look at Acts chapter 7 with Stephen's account. You'll get information there that you don't get in the rest of the Bible. And you want to go to Hebrews 11, the faith chapter. And Acts 7, Hebrews 11, both are the best commentary on the Old Testament that you can have. Acts 7, verse 14, Stephen says, after this, Joseph sent for his father Jacob and his whole family, 75 in all. When he's quoting Genesis 46, verse 26 through 27. All those went to Egypt with Jacob, those who were his direct descendants, not counting his sons' wives, numbered 66 persons. Verse 27. With the two sons he had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the members of Jacob's family which went to Egypt were 70 in all. So which is it, Lord? Is it 75 in all or is it 70 in all? You see a problem there? Apparently seeming or what appears to be a contradiction. Okay? And you always want to have this adjective. You want to say, there's an apparent contradiction in the Bible. Or it seems there's a contradiction in the Bible. Something like that, because there are no contradictions in the Bible. And I say, oh no, a contradiction. Contradiction means opportunity for you to do a little Bible study on your own, or at least call your pastor and ask about it. Want to be more noble-minded like the Bereans? Acts 17:11, Paul says, now the Bereans were more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with great eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see whether these things were so. And this is our main commandment when you have a challenge. You open and you say, you don't like something Pastor Dave says? What is your instructions to solve that issue? Examine the scriptures daily. If they were legitimate in searching the scriptures to see if the Apostle Paul was right, and when they said scriptures, they meant the Old Testament, they were praised for opening up their scrolls and looking to see if what Paul was saying was true. So don't we always get a sick feeling in our stomach or when we think, or someone confronts us with what a contradiction in the Bible? Doesn't it just go, oh man, is that true? Oh, I didn't know this. Is the Bible wrong? There are no contradictions in the Bible. Exclamation mark. None, zero, nada. I've got a book of 400 apparent ones. If you want, if you got a question, well, what about rabbits and coonies? I'll pull out my 400 deals and show you the difference between rabbits and coonies, or whatever. 400 of them. There are many seeming apparent or things that look like a contradiction. Every one is a great opportunity for Bible study. Get a dictionary, get a commentary, open up your Bible, search the scriptures daily. Start with Acts 7 and Hebrews 11 also. Verse 27. This is from the NIV notes. With the two sons, verse 27 in the Hebrew, the Septuagint, the 9 children who had been born to Joseph in Egypt. The members of Jacob's family, which went to Egypt, were 70. The Hebrew also has Exodus 1:5 in the footnote there. Septuagint, see also Acts 7:14, which says 75 in all. So if you have an NIV Bible with the study notes in your lap, that's what it says. NIV notes on the Septuagint, see Acts 17:11, 75 and all. KJV has 70, that's 60 and 10 is 70. NAU has 70, LXE has 75 souls. New King James has 70. Young's Literal has 70. Net Bible has 75 souls. And the Greek has 75 also. So what's going on? 75 souls, they start out with Adam Clark's commentary. There are several difficulties here, which it is hoped the reader will find satisfactorily removed in the note on Genesis 46, verse 20. It is well known that in Genesis 46 and in Deuteronomy 10:22, their number is said to be 70. But Stephen quotes from the Septuagint. Remember the LXX, the Greek translation that was done in about 270 BC? Stephen quotes from the Septuagint, which adds 5 persons to the account, which are not in the Hebrew text. Machir, Gilead, Sutalam, Taham, and Edom. But see the note referred to above. Okay? So the Septuagint is adding 5 extra names in there. Adam Clark's commentary on 46:20. Unto Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim. There's a remarkable addition here in the Septuagint, in the Greek, which must be noted. And there's the Greek text, paraphrased. These were the sons of Manasseh, whom the Syrian concubine bore unto him. Machir, and Machir begat Galad. The sons of Ephraim, Manasseh's brother, were Sutalam and Taam, and the sons of Sutalam, Edom. These add 5 persons to the list and make out the number given by Stephen in Acts 7:14, which it seems he had taken from the text of the Septuagint, unless we could suppose that the text of Stephen had been altered to make it correspond to the Septuagint, of which there is not the slightest evidence from ancient manuscripts or versions. The addition in the Septuagint is not found in either the Hebrew or the Samaritan as present, and some suppose that it was taken either from Numbers 26-29 or 1 Chronicles 7, but in none of these places does the addition appear as it stands in the Septuagint, though some of the names are found interspersed. Various means have been proposed to find the 70 persons in the text and to reconcile the Hebrew and the Septuagint and the New Testament. Let me interrupt a minute. When I talk about the Septuagint, do you remember I asked you to translate one word from a familiar word from a familiar language? I asked you to translate the word tortilla for me. ¿Cómo se dice tortilla?
Tortilla.
¿Qué mean? What's it mean? Translate it.
Tortilla para comer.
To eat, yeah. But that's not what tortilla means.
It's all bread.
Pan is bread, yeah.
Yeah, but tortillas are bread too.
It's an interesting deal, yeah. It's to eat, it's a bread, it's a flat bread. The English speakers, how do you translate tortilla? Huh? Yeah, we just transliterate it right into English, right? Because there's no simple, easy way to translate the word. And that's what you get. When Jesus and the apostles are using in the New Testament, they're almost all of the time using the Greek translation that was done of the Old Testament Hebrew and Aramaic. And so you've got to take these words like tortilla and bring them into English in one word. It's not flatbread, it's not pan, it's not bread, it's different. It's tortilla, right? So that's what's going on here. And so they have different records and things that they're doing. I'm going to show you some more on it. International Varsity Press says in Acts 7:14, citing the Old Testament in Greek for a Jewish audience whose first language is Greek, Stephen follows the Septuagint rather than the Hebrew text for the number of people in Joseph's family, 75. The latter standard Hebrew text has 70. A Dead Sea Scrolls Hebrew text agrees with the Septuagint. So from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is written about the time of the Septuagint, but they're still the Hebrew. They translated it as 70. A table given by Schweitzer, extracted from the Memoirs of Tura, gives the following general view. And I don't have that, but Bible Knowledge Commentary, another apparent discrepancy in Stephen's discourse in Acts 7:14. Stephen stated that 75 persons were in Jacob's family, but the Hebrew text says 70 in both Genesis 46:27 and Exodus 1:5. In both places, the Septuagint has 75. It is commonly said that Stephen, a Greek-speaking Jew, would have used the Septuagint. Okay? And this isn't something they're hiding or confused about. It's a different list of people. Depends on whether you're talking about all of the wives or some of the wives, all of the children or some of the children, all of the children that Joseph eventually ends up with in Egypt, or just the two, and so on. This difficulty, however, they go on. This difficulty, however, can be resolved in other ways. One of the most widely accepted solutions is to recognize that the Hebrew text includes Jacob, Joseph, and Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, a total of 70. But the Septuagint omits Jacob and Joseph, but includes Joseph's 7 grandchildren, mentioned in 1 Chronicles 7:14. And this is supported by the Hebrew in Genesis 46:8, which enumerates 66 names, omitting Jacob, Joseph, and Joseph's two sons. Another solution is the Septuagint 75 includes the 66 plus the 9 wives of Jacob's 12 sons. Judah and Simeon's wives had died, and Joseph's wife was in Egypt. So there's lots of ways that have been presented to reconcile this. I see it as a translation difference between, not an error, but a translation difference between Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. More importantly, we find that Joseph wept. There's passion here. I want you to get the idea of the passion in the Old Testament. 46:29, Joseph, ellipsis, fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. We used to call the Western Wall the Wailing Wall, because there were so many times that the Jews would be there wailing their heart out about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. But they've asked that we don't call it the Wailing Wall. We're supposed to call it the Western Wall. Today's picture from Yehoshua Halevi shows the note-filled stones in the Western Wall. This is just one of the ways that man attempts to communicate with God. So the Hebrews go to the Western Wall. They've been there twice now. And they'll fold up a little prayer request and stick it in the cracks in the wall, and to emphasize their prayers to God. Verse 28. Now he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out the way before him to Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father, Israel. As soon as he appeared before him, he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. Verse 30. Then Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face, that you are still alive. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. Verse 32, and the men were shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, that you may live in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is loathsome to Egyptians. We have racial prejudice right here, back here in chapter 46 of Genesis. And this is in particular anti-Semitism. This is more of the root of anti-Semitism. It's Satan's number one sin, I believe, at this point, is his hatred that he's spewing all over the world for the Jewish people. And it will continue until the Prince of Peace comes. There's no peace in Israel. There's no peace in the world until the Lord comes and throws him into chains. But I tripped out over this. as somebody who loves antique cars, can you imagine Joseph's chariot? Verse 29, Joseph prepared his chariot, and they went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as he appeared before him, he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. I say, wouldn't you like to see the ruler of the world's chariot? Could it be called Chariot Force One? When he says he prepared his chariot, what does that mean? Does that just hook up some horses, or does that get the slaves out there to polish up all the gold that's all over the whole thing? And what kind of horse? Would he have black horses or white horses? Or how many, 6 or 4 or what, I have questions. So Joseph wept again. Verse 29, as soon as he appeared before him, he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. What a touching scene. We have seen each other. They have not seen each other for over 20 years, not knowing for sure if he was dead or alive for sure. Very heavy drama again. This would make a great movie. There's a lot of passion scenes in the Bible that the movie makers have dropped the ball on. And I didn't say who didn't know if each other was dead or alive. Remember how many times Joseph, on the first visit, he's asking him, and how's your father? Is he well? He's concerned about him. He could be dead. He's an old man, And he hasn't seen him in 20 years. But he says that shepherds are loathsome in the sight of the Egyptians. Verse 34, you shall say your servants have been keepers of livestock from your youth even until now, both you and your fathers, that you may live in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is loathsome to the Egyptians. And I say God used this sinful anti-Semitism of the Egyptians to quarantine the Hebrews away from Egypt's sinful ways. For how long? 400 years. He locked them into Goshen, separated them completely from the Egyptians. Whenever you read or I say Egypt, I want you to start thinking of Egypt as the world. If you thought that God separated them from San Francisco, or God separated them from Las Vegas, you'd be on the right track. God's taken this family of 70 people, brought them into the land, and then puts them in isolation in the land of Goshen. And he multiplies them to a couple of million people, several million people. He multiplies them there. And they retained all of their culture, their language, their everything about Hebrew comes out the same on the other side. Verse 47, 1 through 12. And I threw in a picture here of the Temple of Ramses. One of the 3 halls of the Temple of Ramses II at Abu Simbel, which was dedicated to the sun gods Amun-Re and Re-Hokarite. Each hall extended 185 feet into the cliff and was lined with the statues of the king and painted with relief showing his life and accomplishments. These are not just poor, stupid, destitute people. This is the most sophisticated culture on the planet at that time. And because of the rebellion against God, they're now a poor third world country. Genesis 47, verse 1. And Joseph went in and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers and their flocks and their herds and all that they have come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. Then he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? So they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we and our fathers. And they came to Pharaoh, we have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, please let your servants live in the land of Goshen. Verse 5, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is at your disposal. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen. And if you know any capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many years have you lived? Jacob said to Pharaoh, the years of my sojourning are 130. Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life, nor have they attained the years of my fathers, lived during the days of their sojourning. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the lands of Ramses, as Pharaoh had ordered. Joseph provided his father and his brothers with all their father's household with food according to their little ones. So, tremendous scene going on here and playing out in history. But I was intrigued by the fact that he chose 5 of them. Didn't take all of them, all his brothers, just 5 of them. Verse 2, he chose 5 of his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. And I couldn't help but wonder which 5 it is. You know, is it that first pecking order? It doesn't really say. So, verse 6, verse 47, chapter 47, if you know any of them among you with special ability, put them in charge of my livestock. And I couldn't help but wonder, I wonder if he chose Benjamin, his favorite brother, to be secretary of the flocks, you know. We have a secretary of treasury education, you know, but... And this unusual thing here where the lesser is blessed by the greater. Jacob blessed Pharaoh in verse 10. And Hebrews 7:7 says, without doubt, the lesser person is blessed by the greater. So what have you got a hint of going on here? What's the Lord doing with this? Jacob blessed Pharaoh, the ruler of the world, the one who had authority of capital punishment over him. But Jacob blesses Pharaoh. It isn't Pharaoh blessing Jacob. Verse 10, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. However, remember in Genesis 45:8, it said, now therefore it is not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of all his household, and ruler over all of the land of Egypt. Could this be part of what's going on here? Well, many of us think that Pharaoh was probably a very young man, teenager, pre-teenager, young man, 20s maybe. And you've got Joseph, who seems to know everything, can interpret dreams. And so he has assumed the position of not only the advisor, counselor, second in command of Pharaoh, but he says he's the father of Pharaoh. So wouldn't it be natural then that Jacob, who is Joseph's father, would be one step up on the pecking order? Interesting wrinkle anyway. I'll let you chew on it. Verses 13 and 19. Genesis 47:13. Now there was no food in all the land because the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Joseph gathered all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. When the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food, for why should we die in your presence? For our money is gone. Verse 16. And Joseph said, give up your livestock, and I will give you food for your livestock, since your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for their horses and their flocks and their herds and their donkeys, and he fed them the food in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year was ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, we will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent and the cattle are my lord's. There is nothing left to my lord except our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh. So give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land will not be desolate. So that's an interesting passage, and I've recently had a challenge to slavery as described in the Bible a while ago. I did quite a bit of work on it, but I kind of missed this as this is a blessing to all these people. They willingly bought their way into slavery. They'd given up all their money already. They gave up all their animals already. They gave up their land. And now the only thing left was 2 choices. They could die of starvation, or they could sell themselves into slavery. There was no welfare system, if you would, then. There were not widespread charities to feed the starving poor. These people would have died. What did God provide them to keep them from dying? He provided the opportunity in a free market exchange, in a free market economy, that they could sell their bodies into slavery. This went on for thousands of years afterwards. The whole world had a similar system. It was only in the last 150 years or so that a lot of the negative of slavery has been promoted more than that. But it was a way that people could provide for their families so they didn't starve to death. If you were infirmed and you couldn't work or whatever, you'd sell yourself into slavery and he'd find a little job for you. And it happened in America also. And when we get into Deuteronomy, God lays out a whole process. He says, if you love your master so much that you're willing to become part of his household, go to the doorpost of the house, take an awl, and pierce your ear to the household. Say, I love my master's family and I want to be part of this permanently. And then the master of the household would put a gold ring in his ear. And then he would become almost like one of the master's children, part of the household. And there was a voluntary decision that they made, just like these Egyptians are doing now. It was their court of last resort, if you would, rather than being executed or die of starvation, you'd sell yourself into slavery. I was intrigued by this. We come across the first use of the word horse with a wild card here, or caballo in the Spanish, or caballero. Verse 17, so they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for their horses and their flocks and the herds and the donkeys, and he fed them for the food in exchange for all their livestock that year. But it's very apparent to me that God is very proud and loves horses. This is the first use of any form of the word horse. 2 Kings comes up with a lot about it and so on. There's a commandment that for the future kings of Israel that they're never to acquire multitudes of horses or gold or wives. And they broke that commandment almost immediately. But I love this. Something touched my foot. Something touched my foot. Obvious some of you girls have raised horses, so you know what I'm talking about. I don't know what it is. So, airborne. I love this one too. I guess I should have let you know that I was stopping. Are you okay? And they do have compassion, but it's one of the Psalms where God, in a divinely righteous way, God brags about his horses. That in battle, their noses flare and their ears go up and they're ready to go to battle. The rattling of the swords and the smell of the blood and all doesn't slow them. On and on and on for one of the Psalms about God bragging in a righteous way, bragging about the horses that he loves. Verse 20. So Joseph bought all the land of the Egyptians for Pharaoh. From every Egyptian sold his field, because the famine was so severe upon them. Thus the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he removed them to the cities from one end of Egypt's border to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy. For the priests, we got a for that, or for the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have today bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and that you may sow the land. Verse 24. At the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for those of your households, and as food for your little ones. Verse 25. So he said, you have saved our lives. Let me emphasize that. You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's slaves. Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, valid to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth only of the land of the priests did not become pharaohs. Now Israel lived in the land of Egypt in Goshen, and they acquired property in it and were fruitful and became very numerous. Verse 28, Joseph lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so that the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. Then the time for Israel to die drew near. He called his son Joseph and said to him, "Please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but when I lie down with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." And he said, "I will do as you have said. Swear to me." So I swore to him. So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed in worship at the head of his bed. Okay, a lot going on here. Remember back from Genesis chapter 24 where Father Abraham is sending the faithful servant to the unknown place, and he made the servant put his hand under his loin, under his deal. It's a very intimate, personal, the highest form of covenant. Think of the covenant of circumcision or the blood covenant, those kinds of things. We're talking about a total commitment to carry his bones out. I emphasize that because it's important and it's coming up. But the land became Pharaoh's. But it became through a free market exchange of money for food, which both parties freely agreed to. This is not a Marxist, communist, totalitarian stealing from those who earned it and giving it to people to earn favor with them to buy their votes. Pharaoh had put away wealth during times of plenty for the hard times. Then he sold the plenty of goods for money and goods. This is a free market exchange that's going on here. He didn't give it to them. He sold the food to them so they wouldn't starve to death and took them into safe. I didn't mention it earlier, and I don't think I've got a slide for it, but also it said that Joseph brought all of the money into Pharaoh's house. What it doesn't say is he skimmed off 10% for his family, or he pocketed a little bit, or he took a little bit of the gold, or anything like that. It says he brought all of the money into Pharaoh's house. I've showed you the riches of Egypt before. The gold there is unimaginable. It still is. And I believe that we've only seen a portion of it. Egypt has that much gold stashed away. And where did it come from? You just read about it. But the land became Pharaoh's. Our money is used up. Verse 16, I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock. Verse 18, there is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. And verse 20 to 21, the land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude or slavery. He did not buy the land of the priests. That's an important part. There's an angry movement now to deny religious organizations the tax-exempt status that we have. And but it goes back here, over 3,500 years now. This becomes a tradition for an autonomous zone for the priesthood. Numbers 35:6. 6 of the towns to give to the Levites will be cities of refuge, to which a person is killed, someone may flee. You want to see a loose paraphrase of this? Watch some of the 50s and 60s cowboy movies like Judith watches on Netflix. And you'll see what we're talking. It'll be some little Spanish town or Mexican town, little pueblo, and the bad guys, who's escaping wherever, he runs in there and hides, and they give him sanctuary. And it comes right out of the Bible here, sanctuary cities. 1 Chronicles 9:33, those who were musicians, heads of the Levite families, stayed in the rooms of the temple and were exempt from all duties because they were responsible for the work day and night. So we have many examples of the exemption of the priesthood in the Bible. What about what Jesus said in Matthew 17:25? What do you think, Simon? He asked. From whom do the kings of the earth collect duties and taxes? From their own sons or from others? Verse 26. From others, Peter answered. then the sons are exempt, Jesus amplifies. So this system of exemption of religious, separation of church and state, if you would, goes from Egypt all the way through the Bible and into America. Our forefathers in America brought in the same system. Verse 24, give a fifth of it to Pharaoh, the other 4/5 you may keep. That's 1/5, that's 20%. Verse 26, so Joseph established as a law concerning the land in Egypt, still in force today, that'd be during the time of Moses, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. And I say many believe that a just government should never tax its citizens more than 20% of total tax, based on these verses. We are way over 50% for almost all Americans now. We are a socialist country at this point. Our tax rate, your total tax burden is probably in the 70% range if you add it all up. And if you could see the consequences of that. The milk that you bought, that dairy farmer paid taxes on his real estate, paid taxes on his income, paid taxes on his gas, his tractor, his, and it all gets added onto the price of milk that you pay when you buy milk. That's what our problem is now. That's why people can't afford to buy a house. The inflation that they've destroyed our currency with, and this addition of taxes has multiplied and destroyed our economy. And so many of us feel that a 20% tax should never be exceeded. Same thing with, we used to have usury laws, and in my youth, you could no one in the country could charge more than 10% interest on anything. It's way over that now. Bible Knowledge Commentary on 28 to 31 says, Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years to the age of 147. Abraham died at the age of 175. Isaac at 180. If the year of Jacob's move was in 1876 BC, see the chart, chronology of Solomon back to there, Genesis 39, then Jacob died in 1859 BC, almost 2,000 years BC. His birth, 147 years earlier, would have been around 2006 BC. See the chart. At the end of his life, Jacob exhorted Joseph to swear that he would bury him where his fathers had been buried. 49:29. He referred, of course, to the cave of Machpelah, which had been purchased by Abram. Joseph, wanting to affirm that he would carry through on his promise, Jacob asked his son to put his hand under his thigh. Comments on this custom were back in 24. Even as he neared death, Jacob, here called Israel, worshiped. I haven't done a slide, and I don't pound on the pulpit about it, but one of the guys that I like to listen to makes a big deal. Jacob is the only one who got his name changed by God, and God specifically said, you will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, back in 32 and 35. Very strange passage. And then God turns right around and refers to him many times as Jacob. And so I'll let you solve that. Go through the Bible, look up everywhere he's called Jacob, look up everywhere he's called Israel, and see if you can see a pattern there. But we're not going to do it. But he says, bury me in Israel. Do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried. So he wants his bones buried in Canaan, in the Holy Land. Of all the tremendous things that could be said about Joseph's faith, what do you suppose is the one thing that is mentioned in the faith chapter? Go down the list of the things we've learned about Joseph already. We've still got 3 more chapters to go after today. He was obedient to his father. He went out and corrected his brothers. He brought back an honest tale. He got thrown into a pit and didn't seem to complain about it. He cried out for mercy, but he didn't have sex with Potiphar's wife. You go through the list. It's a lot. What does the writer of Hebrews in 11:22 say? By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. And that's all that's said about his life. Nothing about his lack of lust for Potiphar's wife or his honesty of dealing with Pharaoh's money or anything else. But it only makes mention of this. I think that's significant. No mention of his obedience to his father, his faith in the pit, rejecting Potiphar's wife, interpreting dreams in prison, trusting in God to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, storing up grain, testing his brothers, or his ruling righteously in Egypt. Only his faith in the Abrahamic covenant. That's the only thing that the writer of Hebrew gives him credit for. Kind of weird, isn't it? Bury me where they are buried. Well, let me go back to that last one. I know we're running over. The Abrahamic covenant is the foundation for everything. And he, by faith, said, don't bury me here because my grandfather was promised by God to have the Holy Land. That's what he's loosely saying there. Our citizenship in heaven hinges on the 3 land seed promise blessing of Abraham, of God to Abraham. 29 to 30, bury me where they are buried. Dr. Fruchtenbaum says, the joining of the fathers precedes the burial itself. So the fact that one goes to join his fathers is also an implication that consciousness continues even after physical death. And this is hotly denied by your scientists out there. They say there's no evidence that a man has a soul. But God said to Abraham in Genesis 15:15, you, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. No annihilationism here. You're going to go to your fathers in peace. I found this, consciousness and memory after death. Jesus said, I am the God of Abraham. You see the present tense in there? I currently am the father of Abraham who died 2,000 years ago. Luke 16:23, he looked up and saw Abraham far away. And that's an actual story in Luke 16. It's not a parable. Luke 16:25, but Abraham replied. In John 8:56, your father Abraham rejoiced at the seeing of my day, Jesus said. Mark 9:4, there appeared to before him at the Mount of Transfiguration Elijah and Moses. And I just found this, and I love it. Butterflies have a memory. Creation Moments posted, it's a short video, like 1 minute. Can butterflies remember what it's like to be a caterpillar? Scientists at Georgetown University found out about the caterpillar's brain. Caterpillars retain their memories into being butterflies. They go through that complete metamorphosis. Many of us refer to that as like resurrection, and yet they carry their memories forward. Scientists put caterpillars into a Y-shaped tube with a smelly gas on one side. If the caterpillars went down that side, they gave them a mild electric shock. 77% of them remembered the gas after metamorphosis. So God has given a memory and cognitive ability like that, down to lowly caterpillars and butterflies. Bury me in Israel, he says. Do not bury me in Egypt, or the world, I would add. But when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried. And my question to you is, have you got it in your will that you want to be buried in Israel? Many people do, especially the Jews. And they want all their body parts regathered. You see on the news where these big battles go on over them getting a couple of dead, rotting bodies. It's because the Jews want to be buried in Israel. And they want their body parts back. 15:7, I am the Lord who brought you up out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to take possession of it. Verse 7, to your offspring I will give this land. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. To your descendants I give this land. This is why he wants his bones to go back to the land. He's looking forward to the Abrahamic covenant and the restoration of everything into the blessed Holy Land. That's what's going on. 17:8, the land of Canaan, where you are now an alien, I will give you as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants, even into 2024. It's an everlasting possession. Genesis 24:7, to your offspring I will give this land. 28:13, I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. 35:12 through 13, the land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I give to you, and it will give this land to your descendants after you. Why are all the nations troubled with the Middle East right now? Because God gave the Holy Land to Israel and to his descendants after him. Forever, for all eternity. Micah 4:2, the law will go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Ellipsis. Verse 4, every man will sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for the Lord Almighty has spoken. Deuteronomy 28, 1 through 14 is another passage you want to look at. The Lord your God will bless you in the land he's giving you. The Lord will establish you as his holy people, as he promised you on oath. If you keep the commandments, the Lord your God, and walk in his ways, then all the peoples on the earth will see that you are called by the name of Yahweh, and we will fear you. The Lord will grant you abundant prosperity in the fruit of your womb, the young of your livestock, crops of your ground, and the land he swore to your forefathers to give you. So, should we be buried in Israel? What is your earthly promise? 1 Peter 1:6, in this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you will have to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. There's a promise for the church. We'll see you next week. Romans 5:3, we also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Why do we rejoice in perseverance and tribulation and cancers and hernias and broken feet and everything else? Because it results in perseverance. It strengthens us. God stretches us into Christ-likeness. So what are the promises to Christians? To see some more promises to Christians, you'll have to watch the promises in Boonville last week. And there's a YouTube link to it if you didn't get to see it. Or you can just go to my youtube.com/D Couillers. And I put on there, this is a brief public service announcement and a shameless self-promotion. Okay? And that was last week, so it's recorded if you want to see it. More, what are the promises in the Bible? And then in closing, but it is written, eye has not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. That is one of our main promises. God has an eternal destiny for Christians that is beyond our comprehension. You are not physically and mentally capable of even beginning to examine what he has in store for us. We take the little tidbits that we get here and there and rejoice over them. And the suffering that we have in this world then pales into non-importance. So in closing, I offer you salvation this day. The door of mercy is yet open, not yet shut. There does yet remain a sacrifice for sin. So for all that will accept the Lord Jesus Christ, he will embrace you in the arms of his love. By George Whitefield, a little over 100 years ago. And I told you earlier, if the Lord answered all my Bible questions, we'd have to get a wheelbarrow at least to carry around your Bible, and probably more likely it'd be take an 18-wheeler. Never forget that the whole world is in the Satan's realm now. He is the God of this world at this current time. He is going to put an end to Satan's realm, but he's not going to do a complete end to it for at least 1,007 years from today, September of 2024. But he will put a complete end to him eventually. All variety of created objects which represent order and life in the universe could happen only by the willful reasoning of its original creator, whom I call the Lord God, says Sir Isaac Newton. If you go back through all of our most famous scientists, the ones that the entire scientific system is set on, they were almost all devout Christians. And because of that, because of their belief that God made a creation that's understandable, they could do scientific inquiry to see how it works and what it is and where things are at. So I showed you all the Nobel Prize winners earlier that are devout Christians, 60, 70%. Then I found this. The pastor gently asked the congregation to stop actually tithing a tenth of their mint, dill, and cumin. I mean, how much, you're a gardener, how much mint, dill, and cumin does a person really need, you know? Yeah, the dill seeds are kind of handy, you know, but you need a handful of them, you know? You don't need a tenth of everybody's crop. But in an agricultural community with an open food market, farmers would tithe their produce. A lot of evidence of that. They would bring their sheep, they would bring their goat, they would bring their figs or whatever they grew and give a tenth of it. My grandfather used to pastor the Presbyterian Church in Mendocino, California in the late 40s. They survived on a lot of tithed foods. They even got a cow once, and that was the biggest blessing that my whole family history records, is when they got a milk cow who was pregnant and giving milk, and they would get it like 1.5 gallons of milk 2 times a day from it. They made cheese and yogurt and coating and everything you could think of. It. A whole large family of 6 kids and the parents, my grandparents, survived on that blessing that old dairy cow was. And then she turned out to be pregnant and gave birth to a calf. Then they had meat and things to trade with, and so they survived on that barter system. So I say, let light go up for the world for Jesus. Take the promise, the blessing, and the hope, and cast it around the world. The end. Thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't run over too badly today. God bless you guys. So we're going to do a quit there and a quit there.